I'm Joe Sestak, and I'm walking across Pennsylvania. What happens overseas affects us so much here at home, whether it's the economy or whether it is wars that might happen.
My point of this is, if you are to use our military, ensure that you have benchmarks and an end game, an exit strategy, from which you know these are the goals, this is how we can accomplish it, we can measure it, and this is the end game.
I don't think anybody will quibble with the fact that a lot of your viewpoints politically, you are a progressive, but you come with a military background, which most people tie that to conservatism. So talk to me a little bit about what made Joe Sestak. I mean, where does a lifelong military man get progressive ideals and background?
By looking at how the military actually does things. I mean, when I ran the very first time, I said, national security begins at home, and health, education, economic security. They give me bright, educated, healthy youth that make our national defense so strong. But then I'd say, everybody in the military has health care. We don't do it because we're liberal. We just want everyone to actually be healthy to do the mission. Then I'd say, we won't promote you above a certain rate or rank unless you've earned a certain degree, an associate's college degree for the enlisted and a full degree, a master's degree for the officers. Then I say, come on in, learn a skill, earn a pension, be ready to go off and be all you want to be afterwards. Then I pause and I say, everybody in the military is a Democrat. They just don't realize it.
Let's talk a little bit about the walk. Talk about the experience of the people you've met as you've come across Pennsylvania.
If I've been walking these 422 miles by the day I'm completed, 25 people have already stopped and said, can I offer you a ride? Who does that today, people think? Well, they do, particularly in the rural counties.
Diplomacy is not a cup of tea. Diplomacy should hurt when it needs to be, like tough economic sanctions against Putin on his energy, or Iran on their foodstuffs, and others that say, you got to behave.
The letter to Iran?
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about that.
The letter to Iran that Senator Toomey actually wrote to the Ayatollah, the supreme leader of an adversarial nation, Iran, an Ayatollah who has said death to America, was reckless. It showed no experience in world affairs. And it actually is so harmful to the presidency, the institution that is most responsible for securing our safety abroad.
When Senator Toomey was asked his opinion on Syria, his office kept giving the response, undecided. When he was decided, saying, what's your opinion on Libya, what they said was, it's a tough set of circumstances.
You and I a few weeks ago talked about Pat Toomey's record. Your record as a staunch supporter of the Affordable Care Act, and that's something you've unapologetically supported. But that's going to come up in this election. How are you going to address voting? How did you support the ACA?
I hope the issue of the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, comes up all throughout this election. I just had one of the events in Westmoreland County on the Affordable Care Act. Why? Because it's practical and it works. Think about this. The Congressional Budget Office just came out last month and said the Affordable Care Act is now going to be $100 billion less than we thought it was going to be. Why? Because 25% more insurance companies this year are offering their health care plans on the individualized market because they see that I better get in on this marketplace and I'll lower my premiums to attract customers. If 7 out of 10 people in the individualized exchange change their health care plan, they'll save $150 each. Imagine that. And think about Allegheny County here. Allegheny County has the second lowest premiums in individualized health care plan. And you know what? They are lower than the employer-based health care plans here in this county.
So I supported the president when he, I thought, belatedly decided that months and months later that we should use our artillery from the sky, but no troops on the ground in terms of companies, brigades, battalions, or divisions. But yes, some special forces.
And as a military man yourself, how do you feel the U.S. has dealt with ISIS, and how would you like to see that situation?
I think the president was relatively slow to react to ISIS. 13 months ago, ISIS was in Fallujah, only 60 miles from Baghdad. We also had been slow to give arms to the moderate rebels 3 or so years ago, and a vacuum was created because of that in Syria, which permitted ISIS to grow and finally get into Iraq. We cannot, I feel, however, let them have a safe haven there. So now I feel the president is correct in how he's handling it, which is artillery from the sky. very accurate F-18s, laser-guided munitions, for example, that they're so accurate they can put it in this window or that window. No ground forces, because we will train, as we have been doing, the Kurds to come south and the government forces of Baghdad to go to the west, and they're doing that. But we may have, not companies, not divisions, or any of that, but potentially a few special forces that can take a laser and even more accurately pinpoint where some senior adversary is in order that we can decapitate as quickly as we can this terrorist group.
And last thing, I'm going to ask you for, in Pennsylvania, what are the two biggest environmental challenges you see in Pennsylvania? Things you'd like to do if you're elected to the Senate?
Yeah, I think the two biggest environmental challenges and that I would like to help address in the United States Senate are, first, I do think that global warming is the number one strategic livable issue for our planet. As someone once said, there's no planet B.
Right.
It is a national security issue. Our naval base down there in Norfolk, Virginia, where our carriers tie up, is spending hundreds of millions of dollars to raise the piers because of global warming has raised the seas, that we have to spend money so our carriers can tie up at a pier in the future. Take apples. We want them to have a cold winter like they normally used to have, and not any longer. And the juices aren't made better for when we begin, and they begin springing out come the fall. It's an economic issue very much. Number two, fracking. Expect what you inspect. That's what I learned in the Navy. When you have something called the Halliburton loophole that says the EPA is not allowed to see if our drinking water is being contaminated, that loophole that was passed in about 203 is outrageous. What do you mean there's an exemption for the oil and gas industries? Senator Toomey supports that. I don't. I mean, he also voted to drill in Lake Erie. 20% of our drinking water comes from there. So I want to get the right inspection teams out there, both in the Pennsylvania's DEP Department of Environmental Protection, but also the EPA, just to make sure it's done well. And the fines then have to be there because we want accountability.